I still remember the first time I saw a human weep. I know that nobody there when it happened will ever forget. Humanity had appeared on the galactic stage only a few years before. A reclusive species, but friendly. They had made initial trade overtures, but firmly refused permission for any trade routes to extend inside of human space proper. Human couriers always took over shipments at one of the many bustling stations ringing human space. It added cost, but the voracious consumer appetites of humanity meant that galactic commerce had adjusted without much fuss. They were a curious sort in many ways. Mostly, they were odd to most galactic denizens in how their perception was wired much differently than the galactic norm. Most species in the galaxy had not evolved with written language and spoken word as the primary forms of communication, but rather complex exchanges of pheromones. Even species with no knowledge of one another could receive a detailed emotional readout from basic bodily secretions. So widespread was this biological norm. Humans had informed us that some species on their elusive homeworld, as far I knew, never seen by any species, used this method to various extents, and they themselves had a limited capacity for pheromone generation. However, to our refined sensibilities, most human pheromones were clunky, unsophisticated things, a shout more than a word. Most species of the galaxy could have entire conversations, as nuanced and delicate as any, absolutely wordlessly in their pheromones, whereas human pheromones boiled down to hunger, sex, anger, illness. It was somewhat like trying to have a conversation with a child. For this reason, communication in those early days was strained. Our linguistics were as primitive as their pheromones. We talked past each other often. Consequently, we thought them friendly but simple creatures, of no real depth. With their soft skin and large eyes, also no real threat. Human space remained unviolated, because nobody had cared enough to try, but few believed the rigid rules of humanity would fare well against any real test. Toothless merchants with clumsy pheromones. This was their reputation. Truly, no individual is so foolish as a group of them can manage to be. One inevitable result of the human inability to perceive pheromone communication was that they were considered relatively unsophisticated political players. They spoke honestly and earnestly, and seemed unaware of plots, gossip, and hidden meanings right under their noses. Their naivete was disarming, and of no small charm, which served them in good stead diplomatically. Still, the politically savvy species of the galaxy knew it was only a matter of time until one of the more aggressive species took advantage, and the Mok'tid did exactly that. The premier warrior race of the galaxy, the Mok'tid were biologically quite familiar to the humans, who opined that they appeared similar to some of hybrid, between a larger version of the standard bipedal form, along with a creature called a fox, and another called a wolf from their homeworld. Brave, clever, and honor-focused, the Mok'tid were unfortunately still far more driven by the predatory drive of their primitive nature than humanity. The blunt and honest nature of humanity had earned positive initial inroads with the Mok'tid. However, human trade eclipsed many Mok'tid merchants, engendering resentment. Eventually, popular Mok'tid opinion, heavily inflamed by pundits and politicians, came to hold the humans as not only soft and unthreatening, but also to see these upstart primates as dishonorable or mischievous due to their secretive nature, success over Mok'tid merchants, and refusal to allow incursions into human space. The increasingly vitriolic rhetoric reached its inevitable result. Following nearly a year of fruitless negotiations, the Mok'tid Armada Primus cruised into Earth space on an invasion heading. The less warlike species battened down the hatches and stayed out of the way. None could directly challenge the Mok'tid, and there was no political will to come to the defense of a species as new and secretive as humans. The invasion wasn't over quickly. It was over instantly. Within a day, the shattered remnants of the Armada Primus, reduced by approximately 87%, returned to Quixelan Station, the home of the Nebular Congress and all species embassies. On the floor of Congress, the Mok'tid Senator, Klimba, delivered the fleet's report in a mixture of pheromonic painting and halting emotional spoken language, a message delivered in equal parts rage and terror, telling the horrified Congress of weapons that bent the fabric of reality, as well as dishonorable and incredibly brutal combat techniques that sought to take no prisoners. In desperation, the Mok'tid invoked the right of challenge, one of the most ancient traditions of the Congress. We all expected the humans to brush it off. We all would have. It wasn't mandatory. The right of challenge was a tool meant to prevent war through the combat of two designated representatives. It had never been invoked after a war. There was no incentive for a victorious species to limit their spoils and conquest after they had already won. To the shock of all, Senator Ito, the female human senator, quietly accepted on a condition. Klimba was too stunned for a moment to respond. Ito and Klimba had been the two politicians most heavily involved in negotiations to avoid the war. Neither had wanted it. Both had understood the role of pundits and politics in the unnecessary heat between species. And in their negotiations, the two had become rather public friends over the past year, something that had caused a great deal of anger among both of their peoples as rhetoric ratcheted up in fervor. But neither seemed to care much about that. Klimba had assumed the much more physically imposing male human Senator Hotchkiss would accept the challenge, if either bothered doing so at all. Ito, diminutive and unassuming, had not crossed her mind. She had to ask Ito to repeat her condition. If humanity prevails in the challenge, do you agree to restore our honor in the eyes of the Mok'tid, and to agree to a peaceful existence? Klimba stared. The Mok'tid female was the most formidable gender of the species, and a juggernaut compared to a human. Nearly 10 feet tall, with coarse, thick fur, viciously curving fangs, and 4 razor-sharp talons per forelimb, a Mok'tid was a fair challenge for a moderately sized bear, let alone an unarmored human. Should you prevail, human honor would be unquestionable. Her voice dipped sadly, but you will not. Ito's pheromones, as blunt and subtle as all human pheromones, displayed hints of sad and angry, but all present noted one missing entirely: fear. The two met at midday, 2 days from the challenge, per tradition. The Mok'tid clad only in her fur, the human wearing a light, flowing garment, and carrying only a slightly curved blade, removed slowly from an ornate wooden sheath. Klimba roared in challenge. Ito gave a deep bow in silence, holding it for several moments. A single tear fell from her eye. The battle was not important. We all have seen humans fight since that day. The tear was what mattered. Even as Ito raced toward Klimba with remarkable speed, even as her impossibly keen blade whistled in the air, the species of the Congress reeled from the sole tear that had fallen as the battle began. By the end, which came quickly, while Klimba lay slain and Ito knelt, weeping, the entire Congress was immobile, racked with new and terrible feelings beyond belief. Of all the crude, basic human feelings we had become accustomed to, we had never sensed true human grief. It sundered us all, a depth of conflicting emotion and synesthesia so powerful the most stoic of our number wept in empathy. The grief contained Ito's bright, golden admiration for Klimba's courage, the silver sheen of her fierce devotion to her species, the bedrock marble white of her unshakable sense of duty, the scarlet rage at the unfairness of the situation, and the crushing black void that was the loss of a true friend. Ito left the station and never returned to her post. She lives alone in a small abode in a place called Kamijima. She is considered a great hero of both the Mok'tid and humanity for averting a war and establishing human honor beyond doubt. By all reports, she despises this reputation bitterly and will not tolerate mention of it in her presence. Humanity opened its borders the next day. The same day, the Mok'tid delivered a deep apology for their hubris and requested a formal peace and trade alliance. There was no need for secrecy anymore, no need for borders. We had seen what they were trying to keep hidden: a terrifyingly effortless capacity for killing, unfathomable depths of feeling, two incredible gifts combined to form the most bittersweet curse. All species fear and respect humanity. None envy them. Thanks for watching TechnoTitan Universe. Subscribe for more.